Welcome to the Storyboard Special. I am Anuradha Sengupta. At the BrandFinance Forum 2010, brands took center stage with entrepreneurs, CEOs, marketers and accountants getting together to chart the correlation between brand value on the one hand and business sustainability and transformation as well as capital generation on the other. Chairman of Godrej Industries R.D. Godrej, Director Tata Sons R. Gopalakrishnan, Bharti Airtel CEO Sanjay Kapoor and Malcolm McDonald and Unni Krishnan of BrandFinance tell us why it's imperative for Indian companies to accept brand value as the key driver of corporate sustainability. They also share their own personal experiences in getting their companies to put brands at the center of business. Here's that conversation. In 2006, when you got GCPL to value 5 of its brands, what was your key trigger? Why did you feel the need to reassess the Godrej business? Because that was the starting point. You did several after that.
Well, I think it was very important for us to understand what constituted the value in our brands, what we had done up to then for the brands, but more importantly, what we could do going forward. And basically, if you look at a business such as Godrej Consumer Products, it's very brand oriented, it's not asset oriented, we work on negative working capital. So capital is not an issue, but brand building and what the brand can bring to the business in the future is the most important and most critical part of the business. So this valuation gave us a good sense of what we have done to date, and then a lot of the details came out as to what we could do going forward. So this was very useful for our team to work on future plans, what we need to do, how we need to do that, how do we need to understand our consumers better. And actually, if we look at the brand valuation and if you look at the valuation of the brand as roughly the difference between the market value and the book value, of course there are other intangible assets which would also go into that calculation. I think we were successful in doing that. So I think the exercise which we did helped us achieve the goals which we had set ourselves.
I was reading that out of those 5 brands that you valued at GCPL, 4 brands had revenues far less than their value, and therefore the marketing investment was far less than they deserved perhaps. How surprising was that for you to see, and what else did this exercise throw up for you?
Very clearly, to my mind, we tend to under-invest in brands, and very clearly one of the reasons is the accounting principles. I know years before you could capitalize advertising expenditures and then write them off as you gain from them. Now you can't. So the accounting principles affect your quarterly or annual results if you invest a large amount in the brands, but clearly you are reaping benefits later. So this balancing act sometimes prevents the management of a company from, to my mind, doing the best thing in the long run.
Mr. Gopalakrishnan, 1997, what we know as the Tata Plan and what you know, I guess, as the brand equity and business promotion program that you all worked on, ahead of its time. What gave you all the confidence, and what was the need that you felt at Tata Sons to launch on that program?
The Tatas had grown autonomously. Each company had grown independently. They were all listed companies, and there was a need, like in a family, to somewhat define the linkages between the children and the parents, or the brothers and the sisters. In most other companies, through holding company structures, you have done this, so in a legal way, and therefore Tata defined, or the Tata Group undertook to define the brand equity and brand promotion plan, which said that as the parent or the holding company, we will undertake to promote the Tata brand, but being a member of the Tata family means these things you cannot do. It didn't tell you what you should do, and we defined it in that way, and did a valuation to say this is a starting dipstick. Now let's start our journey with the compass. So that was the trigger which caused that set of exercises to be undertaken.
Professor McDonald, since the 1950s, I believe that when you look at the assets of a business, in the 1950s, roughly 80% of those would be tangible assets. In the decade 2010, roughly 90% of a business's assets are intangible assets. Why and how did this change take place?
Well, I mean, it's the same. I'd give the same answer about balance sheets, which I think are about as useful as a bird of prey with a squint, aren't they? They were invented when most of the assets of an organization were tangible, weren't they? And it made sense to have a balance sheet. And, you know, what happened was that you had the emancipation of consumers, you had more, spreading of wealth. Consumers started to get discretionary spend, and they eventually, what happened in the latest recession is that the strength has moved finally to the consumer. And the consumer today, because of technology, knows more about us than we know about them. And the name of the game has changed. All that's doing is making brands, successful brands, even more important. All the successful companies in the world, the real strength in those companies lies in their brand names and their intangibles, not in their factories and their tangible assets.
Okay, let me get Sanjay Kapoor in here. This, we've been hearing a lot about the Airtel Minutes factory model, especially now after the acquisition of Zen. Does this model bear out this proportion of tangible versus intangible assets in a business's overall assets?
The brand is only a manifestation of how the business gets conducted and gets perceived by the customer. And in our case, when we buy technology like everybody else, it's not invented by us. We buy value-added services, we buy content, we buy applications from all across the globe. There's nothing that we invent within the organization. And that's how most of the service providers work the world over. Therefore, if there's a differentiation on the brand that you need to create, it needs to come from a very different perspective. And we very early on thought to say that if this business has to make sense in a country like India, it really needs to cross the boundaries and create new paradigms on affordability. And therefore, we started defying all that was being taught to us. There were experts on telecom who came and told us, the prepaid customers are not good, the postpaid customers are good. The low ARPU customers are not good, the high ARPU customers are good. And this was not making sense because India is not as rich as the rest of the world. And if the services had to become pervasive here, they had to be really at a very affordable price. And therefore we said, if this doesn't make sense, then we need to cast out a distribution model, we need to cast out a minutes factory model, we need to cast out an affordability model, which has a lot of innovation. So innovation, rather than happening on the products and services side, began to happen on the business modeling side. And therefore, anything that we were not good at, we went and partnered with the best. Therefore, a rub-off of our own brand and rub-off of those partners came onto the brand. We started inventing a business model where we said, control your costs in a fashion where you can actually go and offer services at 1 cent. When 1 cent was not a reality, we started working on it good 4-5 years back ahead of the times to say at some stage this market is going to lead there. If 1 billion people in this country are going to afford telephony. And that's what happened. One of the things that's very important on scalability for us especially was we had nobody to emulate this from. Because there is no other country which has in-country operator who has 200 million customers. The only people that we could look upon were probably the Chinese, and Chinese wouldn't disclose anything to you. So we ended up inventing a lot of this stuff internally. Obviously very commonsensical in this business, especially coming out of India with billions of dollars invested, was also the fact that our governance and credibility with the people who invest in us has to be exceedingly high. And that's what was at the forefront. I'm proud to say that we've had several partners during this journey, and I'm proud that each one of them made money no matter what point they exited the company. Finally, the customer empowerment was a way. We could not, in such a large ecosystem, serve every customer face-to-face personally. So we had to really think of business models where we empower the customer to serve himself. Therefore, lots of different channels, making sure it's affordable, making sure it's scalable and repeatable. And that's what we really have done over the last 14-15 years. Actually, these are the elements which allowed us to create the brand over the last 15 years. Communication had very little to play.